Kit Carson, Part 7. In the spring of 1840, Bridger and his party started for the rendezvous on Green River, while Jack Robinson and myself went to Robideau's fort in the Utah country, and there disposed of our furs we had caught on our march. In the fall, 6 of us went to Grand River, and there made our hunt, passing the winter at Brown's Hole on Green River. Excuse me. In the following spring, we went back to the Utah country and into the new park, where we made our spring hunt. We then returned to Robideau's fort and disposed of our beaver and remained there till September 1841. Beaver was getting very scarce, and finding that it was necessary to try our hand at something else, Bill Williams, Bill New, Mitchell, Frederick, a Frenchman, and myself concluded to start for Benton's Fort on the Arkansas. In due time, we arrived on the Arkansas about 100 miles above the fort. Mitchell and New concluded to remain here as they apprehended no danger from the Indians. We continued our journey to the fort, which we reached in a few days. 10 days after our arrival, Mitchell and New came in both naked. The Indians had run off all their animals and had stolen everything they had. I was kindly received at the fort by Messrs. Bent and St. Vrain, and was offered employment to hunt for the fort at $1 a day. I accepted this offer and remained in their employ until 1842. I wish I were capable of doing Bent and St. Vrain justice for the kindness I received at their hands. I can only say that their equals were never before seen in the mountains. The former, after the conquest of New Mexico, was appointed governor of the territory. In the Revolution of 1847, he was treacherously killed by Pueblo Indians and Mexicans. His death was regretted by all that knew him. As for the latter, I can say that all the mountaineers considered him their best friend and treated him with the greatest respect. He now lives in New Mexico and commands the respect of all, American and Mexican alike. I had now been in the mountains 16 years, passing the greater part of my time far from the habitations of civilized man, and with no other food than that which I could procure with my rifle. Once a year, perhaps I would enjoy the luxury of a meal consisting of bread, meat, sugar, and coffee. The last 2 items could be purchased at Rendezvous for $2 a pint, and flour for $1. In April 1842, the wagon train of Bent and St. Vrain was going to the States, and I concluded to accompany it. After visiting my friends and acquaintances, I went to St. Louis, where I remained a few days. Becoming tired of the settlements, I took a steamer for the upper Missouri. As luck would have it, Colonel Fremont, then a lieutenant, was aboard the same boat. He had been in search of Captain Drips, an experienced mountaineer, but had failed in getting him. I told Colonel Fremont that I had been some time in the mountains and thought I could guide him to any point he would wish to go. He replied that he would make inquiry regarding my qualifications for the task. I presume the reports he received were favorable, for he told me he would engage me, paying me $100 a month. I accepted the offer and prepared to accompany him. His object was to survey the South Pass and measure the highest peaks of the Rocky Mountains. We pursued the course to Fort Laramie that is now traveled by immigrants to California. The autumn before our arrival at the fort, a party of trappers who had joined a village of Snake Indians had been attacked by a Sioux war party. The Sioux were beaten with the loss of several men, whereupon they collected a large number of warriors, about 1,000 lodges, to take revenge for the damage they had suffered. There were some Sioux warriors at Fort Laramie when we arrived, and they joined with the trappers and traders to persuade Fremont not to proceed, saying that in all probability he would meet the hostile Sioux and that his party would be destroyed. Fremont replied that he had been sent by his government to perform a certain duty, that no matter what obstacles lay before him, he would continue his march and accomplish his mission or die in the attempt. And if his party were slain, his government would eventually punish its destroyers. We continued our march to the South Pass, where Fremont accomplished all of his objectives and returned to Fort Laramie sometime in September. During the expedition, I had performed the duties of guide and hunter. At Laramie, I quit the employment of Fremont, who returned to the States by the same route over which he had come. In January 1843, I went to Benton's Fort and from there set out for Taos, where I married in February Senora Josefa Jaramillo, a daughter of Don Francisco Jaramillo. I remained in Taos until April, when I again started for the States with Bent and St. Vrain, serving as hunter for the train. At Walnut Creek, we found 4 companies of dragoons encamped, commanded by Captain P. St. G. Cook. He informed us that the train of Armijo and several traders was a short distance in his rear. They had about 100 men, Mexicans and Americans, in the party and a large number of wagons. Captain Cook had received intelligence that a large party of Texans was at the crossing of the Arkansas, waiting to overpower the train and kill or capture the Mexicans in revenge for the treatment Armijo had given the Texans when in his power. The Mexicans concluded to remain where they were and send word to General Armijo of their predicament. The dragoons were to guard them only as far as the Arkansas, and they wished Armijo to send soldiers for their protection after the departure of the American troops. They offered me $300 to carry the letter to Armijo in Santa Fe, and I accepted the offer. I set out for Taos, accompanied by Dick Owens. At Bent's Fort, I was informed that the Utah Indians were on my route. Owens remained at the fort, and Bent furnished me with a fine horse to lead with me so that if I should fall in with any Indians, I could mount him and make my escape. I discovered the Indian village without being seen by the inmates, passed them during the night, and arrived safely at Taos, where I gave the letter to the alcalde to forward to Santa Fe. Sometime before my arrival, Armijo had sent 100 Mexican soldiers towards the Arkansas to reconnoiter for his train, and he was to follow after them with 600 men. At Cold Springs, the advance party was attacked by the Texans, and all but one of the men were killed or captured. The man who escaped had been lucky enough to catch one of the Texans' horses, on which he rode away to report to his general. He encountered Armijo on the march with his 600 men, but when the general learned of the defeat of his brave soldiers, his heart failed him, and he returned in all haste to Santa Fe. After waiting in Taos for 4 days, I received the dispatches from Armijo and started for the Arkansas, taking with me 1 Mexican. When we were 2 days out, we saw a large party of Utahs coming towards us. The Mexican advised me to mount my horse and make my escape, saying that the Indians had no animal that could catch him, and as for himself, he thought they would not harm him, while if they should capture me, in all probability they would kill me. I considered the advice very good, and was about to mount my horse when I thought how cowardly it would be for me to desert this man who had so willingly offered to sacrifice his life to save mine. Upon this, I changed my mind and told him that I would die with him. The Indians were rapidly approaching, with one old chief some distance in advance of the rest. He He came to me with a smile on his countenance and offered his hand. I offered mine in return, but instead of taking it, he caught hold of my rifle and endeavored to take it from me. We tussled for a short time, and I made him let go his hold. By this time, the remainder of the band had arrived. They kept up a loud talk among themselves. Some would ride about us, examining their guns, opening their pans, knocking the priming of their rifles, and indulging in other maneuvers to induce us to change our position, that they might fire and kill us before we could return the fire. We watched them closely, determined to shoot the first one that should raise his gun. They remained around us for about half an hour, then seeing but little hope of being able to kill us without losing two of themselves, they left. I continued my journey and in a few days arrived without meeting with any further difficulty at Bent's Fort. I was informed by Mr. Bent that the dragoons had caught the Texans and disarmed them, after which the train had continued on its march without fear, not even considering it necessary to come to the fort. End of Part 7.